What did we learn over the weekend? And by we, I mean Iran. What do you think Iran learned about the missile defense system in Israel?
They learned that it is formidable, that it is comprehensive geographically. And I think above all, Tehran would have been surprised at the extraordinary coalition operation. I've spent a lifetime in the military, a lot of it doing air defense, guided missile destroyer command, for example. The hardest thing in the world is to knit together the Israeli air defense, the American air defenses alongside Jordan, UK, France, and put them all together. I think Iran was unpleasantly surprised at the coalition level, the comprehensiveness, and most obviously, John, at the result, 99% batting rate, knocking down incoming missiles.
Do you think the success of that defense, Admiral, will shape or influence Israel's response?
No, I don't. As follows. The Israelis are clearly looking at it, and I think they should, as a massive attempt to bombard their homeland, something they have not done to Iran. Heretofore, it's been between proxies, fighting more or less. Now you've got the Iranian military, specifically Revolutionary Guards, and elements of the conventional Iranian military launching a massive wave of missiles at Israel. So they will respond. I think they'll respond in a measured way, but clearly they are going to take on this challenge from Iran.
Is there a way Israel could respond to make sure that there's deterrence when it comes to Iran, but not make sure that they're sparking off some revenge cycle in the Gulf?
Yeah, this is exactly the right question. It's the one clearly under discussion in the War Cabinet. And I'd think of it as an ascending ladder of violence, meaning option one, do nothing militarily, but impose sanctions, more diplomatic aggressiveness, try and get all your allies on board, perhaps some cyber response. I think option two is you go after kinetically perhaps maritime assets, Iranian warships. You up the cyber game a bit. You certainly throughout this are going to go after the proxies. Option three is a strike on the Iranian homeland. That could be fairly tightly packaged, perhaps going after the industrial facility where the drones are built. Option four, and let's hope the Israelis don't pick option four, would be a massive counterattack, hundreds of missiles, both ballistic and cruise, aircraft, all of that thrown at major military targets across Iran. I don't see that latter option. I think you'll find a mix of option two and three as I just described them.
One of those options had to do with the Red Sea. And this morning we have new reporting that there's a naval mission underway with you have the Iranian Navy escorting some of their commercial vessels from the Gulf of Aden to the Suez Canal. Do you think Iran is preparing potentially for some sort of retaliation in these waters?
Clearly they are. And let's recall immediately before, perhaps a day before the strike against Israel over the weekend, the Iranian Navy, in what can only be described as an act of piracy, seized a large merchant ship that is ultimately owned by Israel, by an Israeli business concern. So Iran kicked off that cycle as well. I think the Israelis have to be contemplating something in retaliation for that, hence the escort by the Iranian warship.
Admiral, I've been trying to understand why Iran has felt so emboldened to take these new steps to directly attack Israel on its own land, to move out of the shadows. How much is Iran being emboldened by its relationships with Russia and with China?
Oh, you've put your finger on it. That's what's different. Over the last 3-4 years, particularly Russia, Iran is beginning to feel very comfortable in this partnership they have developed, which at its heart is transactions for weapons, with Iran providing very significant, fairly sophisticated drones to the Russians in their attack on Ukraine. This, in turn, feeds the Iranian sense of having, if you will, a larger coalition partner behind them. And then finally, with China, Iran is fully engaged in the Belt and Road Initiative, has received billions from the Chinese in investments, more of an economic relationship there, but both of those have emboldened Iran.
Admiral, given the fact that they have their own coalition or the appearance of one, how much do sanctions really work to the extent that they've worked at all to this point?
I think sanctions are always an imperfect tool, and we can go back to the global sanctions imposed on South Africa during the apartheid era. It took decades for them to really create a sense of economic disadvantage, which caused a part of why South Africa changed course. So this is, anytime you impose sanctions, it's going to be take time. And here, you're absolutely correct. These are pretty leaky sanctions with at least a third of the world's GDP, maybe a bit more, simply not participating. Not only China and Russia here, but for example, India not participating in the sanctions against Russia that were correctly imposed in the Ukraine war. So it will take time. It's better than nothing, but we should not believe that it will be the path to changing the course of Iranian bad behavior.
Admiral, you mentioned China. Can we finish on China? You're out with another book, the follow-up to 2034, again with the brilliant Elliot Ackerman, a good friend of this program as well, like you, Admiral. The 2034 book was a novel of the next World War. And I just want to talk about the situation between China and the United States. I don't know about you, Admiral, but waking up this morning and hearing the president talk about the prospect of upping tariffs on Chinese steel and referring directly to building ships in America, what do you think we're drifting towards here?
I think, unfortunately, we are drifting toward the possibility of more tension in the relationship. But I'll close my reappearance on surveillance on a mildly optimistic note. I think a good deal of what you're going to hear in that regard over the next coming months is, in fact, tied to the election cycle in the United States. Once we get through that, I think that there will be a possibility of the two sides finding their way to a better modus vivendi. There are clearly going to be no-go zones in the relationship over everything from Taiwan to South China Sea to military competition itself. But I think the possibility of continuing to have coupled economies and not stagger into a decoupling of these two massive economies, I think I'm cautiously optimistic we can work through that after the election.